This presentation is by Astrid Bangus and Ashley Breen, and we are presenting on the effects of workplace incivility on patient care and work productivity in nursing. So to introduce this paper, we have the specific problem is the effects of workplace incivility on patient care and work productivity in nursing. Some information is just in general, nursing incivility is a major problem among healthcare facilities, and it can greatly impact care with patients along with nurse productivity. And it can be difficult for these nurses to work effectively and to provide quality care to patients when they are experiencing incivility. Therefore, these hospitals are having to put forth effort in order to identify and correct these incivility behaviors. Among nurses, is patient care and work productivity compromised when workplace incivility is present as opposed to when it is not present? This is the research question that we are presenting, and why it's worth investigating. Through research and studies, hospitals and healthcare organizations are able to identify and correct incivility within nursing units in order to provide higher quality care to patients.
Okay, and then I will talk about the review of literature, which is divided into the description of studies and findings. So study 1 was a qualitative content analysis study to investigate the attitudes nurses had regarding incivility prevention. The researchers wanted to determine how to prevent workplace incivility in nursing. What they did is that they interviewed and observed nurses between March 2015 to July 2015. There were 34 nurses from 7 different training hospitals of Trabzon University of Medical Sciences in Iran. These nurses were about 25 to 52 years of age. They used Maxtive software to analyze the data. So after all the interviews and field notes were done, they got common units, that being word, sentences, and paragraphs, and they condensed those words, sentences, and paragraphs and give them specific codes. At the end, 3 main codes that were used when preventing workplace incivility resulted. Number 1 being nurses, number 2 being the organization or hospital, and number 3 being the public. The nurses that were interviewed felt that nurses needed to complete tasks appropriately, improve their knowledge and skills, and communicate effectively. The second subtheme were the hospital and organization. The nurses felt that the hospital did not support their nurses. The hospital could support nurses by decreasing their workload, decreasing doctor-related problems, facilitating hospital processes. And the final subtheme was the public. Improving the views of nurses into the public and increasing the public's medical knowledge could also help in preventing incivility in nursing. The second study was conducted by Emblad, Kajeskaba, and Lebec in 2014. It was a quantitative survey used to identify who was on civil to certified registered nurse anesthetists, how severe was that incivility, what was the influence of workplace incivility on burnout among CRNAs, and what were intervention strategies to prevent and combat incivility experienced by CRNAs. They sent out surveys to CRNAs that were members of the Michigan Association of Nurse Anesthetists and who had emails on file on that database. 385 surveys came back. These surveys were collected from October 2012 to November 2012. The survey was actually made of 3 parts. The first part was the nursing incivility scale to assess incivility. The second part was the Copenhagen burnout inventory to assess burnout. And then the third part was a freehand of where they can write recommendations for preventing and combating incivility. The significant findings were that CRNAs experienced moderately high levels of incivility and moderate levels of burnout, and there was a positive correlation between incivility and burnout that was demonstrated through linear regression. The third study was conducted by Park, Cho, and Hung in 2015. It was a quantitative cross-sectional survey. They hypothesized or aimed to identify the prevalence and perpetrators of incivility against nurses and examined association between occurrences of incivility. They surveyed 970 nurses from 47 different nursing units from a university hospital in Seoul, South Korea. The survey was given to all the nursing staff, and the surveys were then returned back to the researchers. They collected surveys from January to February 2013. They used a Copenhagen psychosocial questionnaire to measure violence, work demands, trust, and justice in the workplace. Their significant findings were that most common perpetrators were the patients, physicians, and patients' families. The ICUs experienced the most occurrences of physical violence, threats of violence, and verbal abuse, and the ORs had the most occurrences of sexual harassment and bullying.
Study number 4. This is where George and Thompson, they set out to examine use of an online educational model in order to introduce pre-licensure nursing students to the topic of incivility in the work environment, as well as to examine the effectiveness of the educational modules in the work environment as well. So this was the purpose of the study, and the type was a quantitative and qualitative study from convenience sampling. They had a sample size of 40 senior students that were enrolled in bachelor nursing classes in a small private university in southwestern Pennsylvania. So this study took place within the Department of Nursing, and it was an experiment. They used surveys. They had a pre and post survey which focused specifically on bullying behaviors and whether the participants could successfully address incivility in the work environment after taking these educational classes. The data was collected through a 15-statement survey adapted from the General Self-Efficacy Scale with permission granted. And this test referred to questions that specifically involved nurses that successfully coped and had confidence in the ability to solve situations that had incivility. And the survey was designed with the 4-point Likert scale, and the participants had to answer based off of their feelings regarding their level of confidence to address incivility effectively. These results were then compared from the participants' answers before watching the module and after watching the module. And so this collection method, they used the tools SPSS and the GSES, which is the General Self-Efficacy Scale, in order to analyze these statistics. The findings that were significant, the researchers found higher ratings with students being able to identify incivility behaviors and feeling a sense of confidence in being able to avoid being a target of incivility. And their goal in this was to educate nurses early on in the study program. They were in the bachelor program, so that when they entered into the work environment, they would be able to successfully identify these incivility behaviors. Study number 5 was done by Torkelson, Holm, and Backstrom in 2016. And this study, the purpose of it was to investigate incivility in order to determine which groups were targeted and analyze during various interventions that could be applied to reduce workplace incivility. The type of study was a stratified selection of a survey design with cross-sectional data and a quantitative research design. The sample description, they interviewed 3,001 Sweden participants, specifically 1,461 males and 1,540 females who had completed these surveys. The samples were drawn from a panel of participants that had already been recruited through a previous national representative survey. It was an experiment with the survey used in order to answer various research questions about incivility within the workplace environment. And the data collection method was internet surveys which was administered by the National Public Opinion Agency in Sweden. The certain tools that they had used in order to conduct this study was the Workplace Incivility Scale, the WIS, and the 5 Well-Being Index, and they analyzed this data through SPSS. They also had various demographic variables were included, such as gender, age, employment, supervisor position, and whether or not the participant was born in Sweden. And this was done in order to measure the workplace incivility specifically within Sweden. The significant findings of this study found that workplace incivility was prevalent among 75% of workers, especially younger females. They had the ones that experienced slightly higher targeted incivility rates. Study number 6 was done by Yoon Ju, Bernstein, Min Young, and Noakes, who studied the bullying within the nursing workplace and the repercussions of these bullying incidents. The purpose was to apply a modified conceptual framework of bullying to a nursing workplace through the results that they had obtained from literature in the nursing workplace. This was a mixed method, quantitative and qualitative type of study. And also the sample description, they had not given an exact number of the nurses that were involved within the studies that they reviewed, although they did state that there were nurses within various Korean university hospitals. And this was a non-experimental design due to the review that they had of the different literature. And the data collection method, they had researched various articles and had narrowed them down due to the nurse experience with bullying behaviors and the effects of bullying. They had researched this through CINAHL, PsycInfo, PubMed, and SAGE databases, and they searched articles that specifically pertained to nursing and bullying and the repercussions of that. And they had reviewed 46 articles and had a final 14 articles that they utilized. They had used for tools databases within local hospitals, and the findings had showed that the bullying within healthcare organizations has profound impacts on professional competence, patient care, and it shows a decrease in productivity, a rise in accidents and errors, and a high turnover rate with nurses, as well as loss of qualified workers. From this information that they gained, they wanted to apply a conceptual framework in order to help prevent this bullying within workplaces.
Okay, and now I will discuss the findings of our research. The high prevalence of workplace incivility was confirmed by the findings of Tokelson, Aimblad, and Park. Park went on further to identify the most common types of perpetrators and types of incivility, implementing prevention programs such as online modules, improving nursing knowledge and skills, having hospitals support their nurses, and educating the public about the nursing practice showed to decrease occurrences of incivility. And finally, Young Yu revealed that bullying nurses had profound impact on their professional competence and patient care, evidenced by a decrease in productivity, rise in accidents and errors, and high turnover rates of nurses and loss of qualified workers. So we only really had one or two studies, really two studies that drew a correlation between incivility and patient care and productivity. The other studies mainly concluded or confirmed that yes, incivility is a problem and a rising problem in nurses. But only two of our studies really drew a correlation between patient care and productivity and incivility. So our current practice, Ashley works at Parkridge and I work at Memorial. She works on the step-down unit and I work in CVICU. We both looked into our own hospital policies and we looked at Erlanger's policy. And actually these three main hospitals in the area do not have any sort of position or statement against bullying or incivility. Memorial and Erlanger do have under their social description of how a nurse should be, a little section that says if any nurse were to create a hostile or unsafe work environment, they were to be terminated immediately. Apart from that, there really is no stance or position or penalty for causing incivility in the workplace. So the utilization of research findings are recommendations as per our research on the researchers in our articles are first instituting a zero tolerance policy, providing educational prevention programs to both nursing programs and work areas, improving nursing skills and communication, providing victims of incivility with counseling to prevent further physical and psychosocial and psychological deterioration. And they can implement all of these things first at the academic level when students get accepted into nursing programs. Then when they first get hired into their first nursing job through residency programs or first hire programs, and then after that yearly through an online module or even on paper. We also have recommendations for further research, like the effects of team building workshops between healthcare worker and an online module that provides education on incivility every year. Also, studies geared towards identifying risk factors for incivility could help prevent and decrease the occurrences of incivility in hospitals.
In conclusion, we've discovered that incivility is very dominant and prevalent within nursing facilities, and it's become a troubling problem among healthcare providers and also non-clinical personnel as well. And that when this occurs, patient care and work productivity are compromised when this incivility is present among the nursing staff. Bullying within nursing units also has profound impact on the nurses and the professional competence in patient care. It causes a decrease in productivity, a rise in accidents and errors, and a high turnover rate with nurses, as well as a loss of qualified nurse workers. The studies indicated that there was a compromise in nursing care with incivility present, yet the studies did not specifically prove how this patient care was compromised in the midst of incivility. So we find that all of the articles pointed to a decrease in care with incivility, yet there were no specific studies that were done in order to prove exactly through what mechanisms the patient care was compromised. And that is our conclusion for the findings of our studies. We also have our reference page. As you can see, all of the articles were found recently. We have an article from 2017, 2014, 2015, and on the next page we have articles from 2016 and 2014. And these are referenced in APA format for our review, for our study.
That's all, folks.